Okay, good morning. Let's go. So, Chaim, it's good to have you back. Siman Reish Nun Beis Halacha Hey. Muta liftayach umuta liftayach mayim legina. You're allowed to open a tap, a faucet to the garden. V'hem nimshachin v'holchim b'chol Shabbos. And the water is just sort of trickling out. It's just flowing out over Shabbos. You began the melacha before Shabbos, so therefore it's not. You didn't do anything on Shabbos. It just sort of continued. Lahaniach kilor, which is, he explains in the bracket, to put some sort of salve, some sorts of medication of us, like a thick cream al ha'ayin, before Shabbos, even though this particular medication may not be allowed on Shabbos. Veloses mugmar tachas hakelim, to put some sort of perfume tachas kelim underneath some clothes or kelim, and that will perfume, that will give a nice smell to these clothes, kol haShabbos. Even if it's in a kli, the ein adam tzuva shvisas kelim, or veloses sa'irim begigis l'shroison. You can put barley in a big barrel so that they soak and they can get soft. V'tanin bekuris beis habad, and you can press for beams from an olive press. All of these things before Shabbos. V'alzeisim v'anovim, on olives and grapes. V'hashemen v'yayin hayotz mehem muta. And then over the course of Shabbos, wine or oil will sort of just flow out from the initial press that was placed before Shabbos. That would be muta. V'ayin lekaman siman shinchof Seif base, which is the halachas of schita, which the Mishnah will refer to. V'chein boisef, you take unripe grapes or malilos and like stalks, she'riskel b'bayjom, that was crushed from erev Shabbos. Matarim hamashkem hayotzim mehem, any liquid that emerges from them is muta. And furthermore, muta loses chitim l'teicherei chaim. You can put chitim, wheat in a mill. Shalmayim somach chashecha. You're doing all of these activities before Shabbos, where the actual and they sort of just continue through Shabbos. That's all allowed. And there's no problem of the noise that it makes, because you put it there before Shabbos, and then they sort of just press start. And then if there's ongoing noise, we're not worried about hashmoas kol, which we'll talk about soon. And some people asa the mill whenever there is a problem of hashmoas kol. And that's how you should behave lechatchila. We'll talk about hashmoas kol. How does that apply? So, for example, an alarm clock, a dishwasher, all these things. We'll talk about soon. However, Miu b'makom seder says Remo yesh lahakel. Commotion is ba'alel so siman reish me'an dalet. Umuta lahamit kli mashkele shekorin zayga me'erev Shabbos. You're allowed to put a clock. He calls it a zyga. He says at the bottom of Shan. I'm picturing this big grandfather clock. This big with chimes, on an hourly basis or whatever it is. Even though it sort of makes a noise, you're allowed to have that on Shabbos. Because everyone knows that you didn't do anything on Shabbos. You just have a grandfather clock there, and nothing was activated by you on Shabbos. Okay, so let's see the detail of all of the above. So, Siman Reish Nun Beis Sif Hey Sif Cotton Lamed Hey. So the Mechaber said you're allowed to open a water tap or faucet before Shabbos, that the water just flows out to the garden on Shabbos. Hainu says the Mishnah Berurah shepeseach mayim somach lechashecha. You open the water before Shabbos, Friday afternoon, misfas ha'ma'ayan, from the border of the well, sheyelech legina lahashkei, so that it's going to irrigate the field. Ulahaniach, so he says also to put some sort of medication which is not allowed on Shabbos. If you put it before Shabbos and it stays there for the duration of Shabbos, that is also allowed. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Vav, v'hainu, av shenisha munach b'Shabbos, even though it's going to stay there throughout Shabbos, validei misrape v'hoilech, and that will give medication throughout Shabbos, that's allowed. You can put a bandage on before Shabbos, that's also all allowed. Killer over, a thick salve, I think you said in English, some sort of cream or medication. To kilo rach v'tzoleth, it's very soft and loose. Af b'Shabbos gufam matalanicha k'shayishar mi'bayidyoim k'delekam shinchof ches sif chofal ha'ayin shom. But if it's a little more liquidy one, then it's much less of a concern. But check out shinchof ches when it comes to the halachas of refuah medication on Shabbos. If you just look at 19. In footnote 19, he says, the reason why it's allowed over there, if you use it like a thin liquid as some sort of medication, because the onlooker won't think you're doing anything medical. Just washing your face or something. Even though you know why you're doing it, if it was done before Shabbos, then you're not allowed to leave it there if it was soaked from before Shabbos. If you mix, this is very interesting halacha, but it's not hilchos refuah now. But he says over here, la'arev trufa ba'oichem ba'yom. If say, for example, you've got a Panadol, which you can't take on Shabbos unless you've got a very bad headache that you need to lie down and things like that. But let's say, or a milder thing, a hay fever tablet, which it depends how extreme your situation is on Shabbos. But what he says here, if you put the bit of hay fever tablets in a piece of challah or in some peanut butter, the Falk used to say that, and then spread it on Shabbos, and it's not nikar at all that it's a tablet, then Orach shemuta people just think you're eating a peanut butter sandwich or a piece of challah or whatever it is. That's okay. So the fact that you know that it's in there is not a problem. So that is a good eitzah that Shlomo Zalman suggests. Okay, Mr. Shem will get there with Hilchos Refuah. Lamed Ches she'osa. So this is going on the killer, this cream. There's also shemei yamarech. You might come to spread it on Shabbos. Velosis mugmar. That's putting some perfume underneath some kalim or some clothes. Levoina or mine besamim noisim aloeishim ma'ashnim abegodim sheirechon noidef. That if you do it before Shabbos and it just continues over Shabbos, again that's another example of something which is allowed. Certainly if you put it on the ground it will be okay. This is soaking sa'irim. With Shabbos also, to actually put them in water and soak them on Shabbos is a problem. See if you dalif ayin sham, various reasons why it's also in 22. He talks about it. He says, Mishum told the Zoreya, if you're soaking all this stuff on Shabbos. But again, the principle is that if you do something before Shabbos and then let it just continue over Shabbos, then it's considered okay. V'tanin says the Mishnah Berurah Sif Cotton Mem base that you take a press and you put some grapes or some olives under the beam, and if you put the beam there before Shabbos and just then let it continue over Shabbos, again that is allowed, and not only is allowed, you're actually allowed to eat of the juice that comes out that was produced on Shabbos. Says Mishnah Berurah Mem, even if it wasn't fully crushed before Shabbos, that you're allowed to do that. Because the activity began before Shkia on Friday afternoon. Now, regarding the oil and the wine that came out, you can only partake of the olive oil or the grape juice if the pressing actually took place before Shabbos. That you were able to sort of crush it before Shabbos. Because then if you do any form of schita afterwards, there's no chiyuv chatzos, because we'll see the details in Shin Chof. And therefore the water that came out, or the liquid that came out, is actually muta. There's no concern of schita. Why? We'll see in a second. In Hilchas Schita, if you find, let's say you've got a bowl of grapes in your fridge, and there's in the Friday Shabbos morning, you take them out of the fridge, and you've got a bit of pool of water underneath it. So there's a concern of eating that liquid that came out of the grapes of Shema Yischet. Oh, this is nice liquid, I'll do some more. You might do, now for Schita, on Shabbos, the deraisa is grapes and olives. If you were to squeeze that and produce liquid, that is an issa deraisa. So therefore, there's a gezer Shem Yisrael. But here, since you put the beam before Shabbos and the liquid started emerging before Shabbos, we're not chayshish, we're not gozer in that situation. And that's really what Mishnah is saying. Okay, v'Hashem and v'yayin in Mem Gimel. V'Hashem and v'yayin v'yotze. Pirush af ma sheyotze b'Shabbos. Like I just explained, we're not geyser like we are in the case of Zeisim and Anovim. Why? Because there, if you squeeze olives or grapes, there is a chi of chatzas. Therefore, if liquid emerged from olives and grapes, which is a deraisa, by themselves, then there's a gezerah not to drink that on Shabbos because you may come to squeeze grapes and olives. Aval hacha, but here shekvar nidrusu alidei hantiina, because here they've already been pressed from the heavy beam, or belav hachizov me'atzma, and therefore they're just emerging. The liquid is emerging by itself. It will just sort of hasten the process if you squeeze it more with your hands. Then the issa is only midrabanan, and alkain bezov me'atzma b'Shabbos shari legamar. And therefore, if it just it sort of flowed out by itself, it would actually be permitted to drink this grape juice and liquid on Shabbos. And so too, boisel melilas, if you've got unripe grapes or stalks or things that you press, that would be the same svara. We're only talking about where you actually did most of the pressing before Shabbos, and then it sort of just continued to flow out over the course of Shabbos. That would be allowed. Okay, so that's a good question for someone who's learning Hilchos Chita. When would it be okay to drink olive oil or grape juice from olives and grapes that emerge on Shabbos? Good quiz question. The answer is normally it's also. Because, like I said, gezer shema yisched, you may come to do it. However, if you put it in a press, and the press was most of it was done before Shabbos, but a bit more just emerged over the course of Shabbos, that would be allowed. That's what it's saying. Okay, v'chein boise mem dalet. Anovim shebetchilosen. What is boise? Unripe grapes. Anovim grapes betchilosen kashein dakin. They're very small. Moitzi mehen mashke letabel boibosa. You can sort of dip meat in it. It's used for that sort of sauce. Lefishu chazuk v'karv lachmas. It's like a sharp taste, and it's almost like vinegary. Omalilos stalk shebolin shelo bishlu kol tzarchon miraskon v'tanim ba'avonim. You can sort of crush them with stones. Or mashke zov mehen or metabel. But you could also some liquid emerges from the wheat or the barley, and you can be tovel food into it. Los es chitim, to put chitim, v'hu adin shemuta oz ba'atzman nefterach gamken es ha-miskeres shal ha-mayim shal ha-dezeh teichen in rechaim. It's a water mill, and you can open the mill, which turns the whole thing and operates it. Shal mayim v'lo shal behema, but not of an animal pushed mill, an animal operated mill. Why? Da'odem mitzvah shvisas behemdei. Because, of course, we're chayiv on shvisas behemdei. We can't let our animals work, so it must be a water-operated mill rather than an animal-operated mill. Or b'chol makom. So this is going on the Ramah, I think. Yeah, this is going on the Ramah, and who says v'yesh oisrim b'rechaim v'chol makom sheish lochish lahashmos kol. Says the Mishnah Berurah, memches v'chol makom klal zeh kol kiyotze bo hashmias kol. The whole issue of hashmoas kol, of making a noise on Shabbos, the avsha milsa v'ikazilus l'shabbosa, because the whole concern of using a machine or something, activating a machine on Shabbos, which is going to generate a noise, is a problem of zilusa de Shabbos. It's considered as cheapening Shabbos. If, however, the mill belongs to a non-Jewish person, that will be fine. If you rented it out to a non-Jewish person, and you gave him tfuah before Shabbos, that would be okay if you fix the price with him. He's doing it on his own volition. You got to just be careful not to stand over him and watch him, because then it would look like you're his shliach. He's your shliach. If you want to be careful, you want to check for chometz, and therefore that's why you're standing there. So that would be okay. To make sure you have a guard there, to make sure that the fellow doesn't steal anything. So long as you're not talking business at all, you're just watching over there. Now, b'makom seder. So, in a case of hefsed, then the Ramah said yesh lahakel hatam because we can be semich on the first opinion that the Mechaber brought, shemakeles litin mibayjim, that we make it if you put you activate this before Shabbos. Aval b'Shabbos also litin afilu adei Yehudi. You can't actually give anything to the Yehudi on Shabbos itself. Afilu hischir, even if he is your sachir. V'ayin le'el b'simin reishim. Give him Mishabur Sif Cotton Yud to yaseh shtam mechir le'en Yehudi to whom mechir le'al Shabbos. Okay. Now, why is it okay? But Mokum Hefsed Yesh Lahakel. So he says, the next thing, the grandfather clock, which is chiming every hour. That's okay. Afal Pishim Ashmiya Kol. yeah, it's making a noise, and it should be avsha milsa, it should be prohibited. Everyone knows that you've got this grandfather clock, you set this up yesterday. And says Mishnah in Sif Cotton Nun, and people won't be concerned that you actually activated this on Shabbos. Now, the question is, what about setting an alarm clock before Shabbos? Yeah, you want to get up early on Shabbos morning to learn, to go to Hashkoma, whatever it is. Can you set an alarm clock on Friday afternoon before Shabbos to go off on Shabbos? Is it a problem for Hashmoas Kol? So take a look at 28. Very interesting. Setting an alarm clock before Shabbos so it rings on Shabbos. If the alarm noise is so loud that it will be heard beyond the bedroom, where you're sleeping, or other people in nearby rooms, that there's a problem of avsha milsa. Because that's like a weekday activity, and therefore it's considered avsha milsa. People may suspect that you activated this on Shabbos. However, I think this is the contemporary practice, that there's no concern of using an alarm clock on Shabbos. People are not choishish, and it could be that times have changed. That it's a very common thing to have an alarm clock, and therefore Shlomo Zalman is certainly matir. And I think and even Ramosha, if it's not such a loud exam, it's only heard in your bedroom, then that would certainly be okay to set the alarm before Shabbos. Let's just finish off the Mishnah Berurah, last Sif Katan. So hakol yedim v'lo yachshadu shemida b'Shabbos v'hinei muchach kan to asal hamida b'Shabbos. You can't actually activate it on Shabbos. Even if you tell the non-Jewish person to set it up, and your kavon is l'shem mitzvah. For example, ladies man kriya shema tefillah, you wake up in time to say kriya shema or say some tefillah. Gam kein tzorich iyun. Te'efsh sheyesh b'melacha dvar Torah v'lo huta al yedei en Yehudi afilu b'makom mitzvah, and that wouldn't be allowed. So, for example, you ask him to set your alarm clock or to set your grandfather clock. The notes speak about what exactly the issue of changing a clock on Shabbos and winding it up. Remember those days? That would be that could be a problem of tikkun moneh, makar patish. The notes talk about it. But either way, so basically, just to summarize, what emerges from this sif is to begin a process before Shabbos, which continues on Shabbos, is generally mutar, and there is an issue of hashmas kol and avsha milsa, and that therefore talks about setting dishwashers and these sort of things. That's considered zilusa de Shabbos. That's it's a weekday activity. Hoovering is all caught by zilusa de Shabbos and these sort of things. Setting an alarm clock, certainly not a loud one, would be okay. And even according to Shlomo Zalman, it would be well known that it was set before Shabbos, so no one will be choishish you that you set it on Shabbos. Okay.